I think it's pretty clear I don't like the 2016 Powerpuff Girls. What about the original? Are there any episodes of the original Powerpuff Girls I particularly don't like? Well, several. Like See Me, Feel Me, Know Me. This is an episode discussed by Powerpuff Girls fans. Some like it, others don't. I'm on the second side. Sorry, this episode was kind of disappointing. Now, there is an aspect of this episode I actually really like the songs. The music was absolutely the best part of this episode. I spent weeks and weeks singing every single song of that episode. I could watch this episode just because of the songs.
When I feel the sun, my eyes open wide, my troubles are gone.
The problem with this episode is when I start to follow the story. Let me tell you the biggest problem with this episode the villain. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The villain is the main problem of this episode for me. For starters, he stole the spotlight on my favorite villains. When the villains of the Powerpuff Girls were singing Townsville's Going Down, I was having a blast. It was such a badass scene only to be interrupted by this gnome who then took over the episode. Why? I don't want to see another villain. I want my favorite villains. Speaking of which, this episode was released in season 5, and by that time, the Powerpuff Girls had faced a ton of villains. But in this episode, they failed to realize that the gnome was a bad guy, even though there were clear signs like his devious face, his red theme, the yellow eyes, and his proposal to remove the girl's powers in the condition that he will remove all evil from the world. Even if he looked like an angel, I probably would not accept that deal simply because of the consequences of doing so and how I just don't know this guy. Like, what if this guy only wants to remove all evil from the world because he wants to eliminate the competition and the obstacle? That's the attitude the Powerpuff Girls should have taken because they are the actual superheroes and should know this because they've been fighting crime for a long time. But no, they accept it partially because they'll finally be normal girls. As a result, the gnome removes all of her powers and all evil from the world, including the villains. Great, now I definitely know they're not heavily involved in this episode. One question though, who exactly decides what's good and bad? What if I think him isn't that evil? What if I think Miss Keen is a horrible human being? The definition of good and bad is subjective. Is this no removing what is considered universally bad? Later, the citizens of the Townsville are happy that the world has no evil, and they decide to idolize the gnome because he was the one responsible for all the evil removed. Now he's a godlike figure for the citizens of Townsville, and they pretty much do whatever the gnome wants. See? Told you it was a villain. Then the professor starts singing about how the gnome took away the liberty from the people, therefore, there's still evil in the world. This scene makes me suspect that this episode was supposed to be longer, but they cut down to 22 minutes. There's no moment in the episode where the professor has the realization that the gnome took away the liberty of the people, and that's bad. Heck, if I had watched this episode as a kid, which I didn't, I mean, I did, but I cut it while it was at the end. If I had fully seen this episode as a kid, I would be confused at why the professor thinks that the situation is broken. I mean, there was no evil, and the citizens mostly seemed happy. But anyway, the professor convinced the girls that there's still evil in the world, and somehow that caused the girls to regain their powers. This is where things get a little confusing. So if all this time there was still evil in the world, then doesn't that mean that the deal the Powerpuff Girls made was violated from the beginning? The gnome is clearly a bad guy, so when he removed all evil from the world, shouldn't he be removed as well? And if he's not removed, then that means that the deal was broken from the beginning. Ergo, the Powerpuff Girls should have never lost their powers. I guess you can say the gnome tricked the Powerpuff Girls, but if he did, then why would the girls regain their powers? This episode falls for me whenever I touch on a subject that has to do with a villain. Later on, the girls faced the gnome, and while they were fighting, the girls addressed how there's no good without a bad, and that concept somehow made the gnome disappear because his existence is paradoxical or something like that. So you're telling me that the girls singing about how there's no good without the bad was somehow enough to eliminate his existence? What if I think that statement is bogus? What if I think you can have the good without the bad? Who's deciding what's true and what's false? But even worse, if there's really no good without the bad, then how was this gnome born? Heck, we don't even know how it was created. In order for all of this to make sense, we have to assume that this gnome was created by some sort of powerful entity, and the gnome has the power of eliminating all bad and possibly good. So I guess when the girls sang about how there's no good without the bad, the powerful entity was all like, oh, you know what? Those girls are kind of right. I'm going to wipe out the existence of this gnome because he makes no sense. That's the thing with this episode. Concepts just pop out of nowhere, and then they seemingly have power to the point of deciding what exists and what shouldn't exist, when in real lives they would solely be opinions. At the end of the episodes, after the gnome disappeared, the girls started singing about why can't we all get along. This last scene is criticized by several people for being confusing because a while ago the girls seemingly had the answer of that question, and it was that there was no good without the bad. You know what? I'm going to do something strange. I'm going to defend this scene. I think I understand what the girls meant when they sang, why can't we all get along? The girls are convinced that everyone deserves liberty. They truly believe that everyone can be, say, believe whatever they want. However, as a consequence, people become different. And the girls are questioning why can't we all put our differences aside, accept our differences, and get along. However, I understand why some people would get confused. The girls sang Why Can't We All Get Along immediately after they sang how there will always be bad guys. So it gives the impression that they're wondering why can't everyone follow the same ideology, the same moral. Do I think the episode was bad? Heck no. I think the episode had a good message about freedom of speech. They just didn't execute it well. Even if this episode had been longer, I would probably still have a problem with the villain. Do I hate this episode? Well, I enjoyed listening to the songs, so nope. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye for now.